Okay, so today's topic is the Sealey Challenge and poet Nicole Sealey. The Sealey Challenge is a challenge to read a book of poems every day for the month of August. And it was started in 2017 by poet Nicole Sealey, who is the executive director at Cave Canem, a Black literary organization. And Nicole Sealey is an amazing poet in her own right. We may be reading some of her poems today. And Nicole Sealey's goal was to make sure that people are reading poetry books and especially work by marginalized voices and making sure that people support independent presses, independent bookstores, and in general, making sure that we don't have hierarchies. Like if we read a chapbook, it's just as important as somebody who's like a more established author like Terrence Hayes. It's a way to connect with poetry more fully. And it's very much in the spirit of this group, which is DIY MFA, because it's like, poetry education that you get to do yourself, but it doesn't feel alone because you're in community with others who are sharing on social media like Instagram, Facebook. Some people use X. I don't use that anymore, but people share like hashtag Sealey Challenge, hashtag Sealey Challenge 2024, and they share a picture of the book and then sometimes maybe a picture of a poem in the book. And every day for the month of August, you follow all these people who are doing that, and then you do it too, and you connect with other writers. And I've actually met other writers on Instagram just from doing the Sealey Challenge. I also have found out about books that exist and publishers that exist that I never heard of before. And it's a really good way to learn more about the small press poetry community. So that's why I really love it as somebody who has, published with small presses, and that's really the only community that's available and accessible to me. It's been an important way to connect with community. So that's what the Sealey Challenge means to me. That's my intro. And I'm just gonna pass it to Valerie if you like to say any sort of intro about like what does it mean to you.
Yeah. I I don't know what year I started doing it. A couple years ago, I was telling somebody earlier that I feed off of creative energy from groups. So anytime like a group is willing to kind of work on some kind of group creative project, I love it. It's hard to get people to talk about poetry that they're reading with this intensity usually. So I love it. Usually what I'll do, and I'm working on this now, is I get kind of a stack of books that I intend to read. I don't usually follow it. I usually half of them end up being there, half of them end up being other things that I see other people read and I get during the month. And I do a stack at the end showing everything that I ended up reading. And every day I try to take a picture of the cover and I don't know, like a few poems that I like in it to kind of entice people, or make an argument that you should buy this book, it's really good, look at these poems, and talk about it. I also like how many presses have sales on poetry in the month, and I get like a year's worth of reading suggestions during the month too, seeing everybody's work. It's like a really great flurry of ideas and poems, and it's just great. I love it.
Yeah. And I have sort of a stack of books that I've been collecting throughout the year because I know now I'm going to do the Sealey Challenge. Now, the first year I did the Sealey Challenge, I didn't know about it until I was like actually doing it and learning about it. So I had to go to the library and get a ton of poetry books like a couple weeks in a row. But now throughout the year, I'm like collecting books specifically for the Sealey Challenge, which has helped me. So I thought I would share some of the books that I have. I have a big stack, so I'm just gonna share a few. but one of them is a chapbook, and certainly chapbooks, it's recommended that you read chapbooks as well. Chapbooks are not like as widely distributed. There aren't as many copies usually, but it's so important to really support poets who are emerging. And actually, some of the best poems are currently written in chapbooks. So this is one called Delta by Alder, who is with us. Oh, it's a little blurry. I'm sorry. I probably should turn off my camera blur. But so I have that one. And then I have a book by Zeke Russell called Wintered Over, and it's published by Game Over Books, which is an amazing small press that has published my work and many other people's in the community. Okay, if I put it in my face, you can see it. Okay, Wintered Over by Zeke Russell, and then this is the chapbook by Alder. Maggie Nelson is one of my favorite poets, and I found this book of poetry that she wrote. Miles Taylor, our beloved Miles Taylor, who runs Boston Poetry Slam community, published this book with Game Over Books, Masculinity Parable. So I'm going to be reading it again for the Sealey Challenge. And then one of our regulars, who I think isn't here tonight, but we'll be featuring at Cantab soon, Amelia. This is Amelia's book, which I'm excited to read. And again, another small press. And
Amelia's going to feature at the Cantab?
yes, isn't that
She's
so
gonna come
amazing?
in? She's going to be there in person?
Yes, yes, you should
Oh.
come. It's soon, in a couple weeks, I think. Not this week, but maybe the next week.
Oh, I'll have to try and come for that. Okay.
And then this one by Valerie Loveland, poetry about unsolved mysteries. Excited to include it in the Sealey Challenge this year. So those are ones that I'm most excited about, and I thought I would pass this. Valerie, is this a prompt you want to do? You don't have to do all the same things, but did you want to share anything?
Yeah, sure. And you know, something else that I'm trying to do, I have some that I started and didn't finish. So I'm trying to like use it to kind of get them finished too. Like, oh, I read half of it. I could just read the other half for the challenge. I am gonna also do I have Zeke's book, I have your book. Those are both on my list. You know, I thought I had Miles, but I definitely don't. So I thought I ordered them together, but I guess not, or I don't know. I should check on that. But I'm excited about, I don't know if I'm not blocked, right? I don't have a blur on. This
We can
says,
see it.
are you bored now? This is, I have a couple autistic poets in my stack, partially because I'm not officially diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure, pretty sure I am. It's hard to get officially diagnosed. So I'm reading from autistic writers. I have another one here, A Prayer for a Non-Religious Autistic, poems. And something really interesting, you probably talked about this a couple months ago. Hannah Emerson, I read them before, and I noticed at the end of the book, it said that it's published under an imprint that is supposed to be for, you know, non-speaking poets, non-traditional like ways of writing, non-neurotypical writers. So I got a couple books coming from that imprint that's out. You know, I should probably find out what it is and say.
Yes, Milkweed Books has a series called Multiverse, and it's
Exactly.
devoted to neurodivergent authors. And you can get the book, you can just download it as a PDF from the website. So if you're kind of like last minute, like, oh no, I need a book, it's really easy to get.
Yeah. So I have a couple of those coming too. Yeah, I also, you know, I swore I read this before by Nicole Dutton, but I don't see that I read it. Also, I put like a little sticker on the side of things that I read, like a shiny sticker, and that's not on here, so I must not have read it. But yeah, I have a ton of stuff, and it's gonna probably be mixed around, but I'm kind of focusing on you know, neurodivergent writing, especially this time.
Yay. Well, I'm looking forward to following you and seeing your posts. What form of social media do you prefer to post on?
So, you know, I don't know. I feel like I should do it like I do. I have a Facebook. I have a Facebook group that I was doing, but it kind of fizzled out, and a couple people left Facebook since then. I do have Blue Sky. I do have an Instagram. I was thinking of just like maybe just blanketing the whole thing and just doing the same post throughout, because I don't know where it's almost like you don't know where the main action is going to be until it starts, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be posting on Instagram and have automatic post to Facebook. I think that's how I'll do it. I might do some mention on the Self-Educating Poets Network website too, depending on how it goes. Yeah, if anybody else wants to jump in, feel free to jump in at any time. Okay, I wanted to share other random facts about the Sealey Challenge. One is, did you know that you can mail your poetry book to the Sealey Challenge headquarters and they might feature it
Oh.
on their social media during the Sealey Month Challenge?
Hmm.
So when I get some more copies of my book, I might be sending one there, maybe probably more for next year. But Valerie, you should do that.
Yeah, I didn't
You should
know.
send the Unsolved Mysteries one to them. I bet they would feature it. It's so cool. Another fun fact is the next session of DIY MFA is Haiku, Health, and Disability on Sunday, August 18th. So just shouting it out. That's our next thing, and that's going to be run by Jade. I'm going to do a screen share, if that's okay. There's some things on the Sealey Challenge website that I wanted to share. Okay, can you see the Sealey Challenge FAQs?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just mentioned this, but you can actually send your book of poetry to them. No, they cannot guarantee that they will review it or talk about it, but they might. And I think many of us are part of this community already. And here are some suggestions for folks participating in the challenge. Select books that can be read in a day. So I sometimes will completely read the book, and other times I read it before and I'm just kind of reviewing it and I'm reading a few of the poems. Just to be honest, right? Like, this is not about perfection. This is about participating in whatever way you want. If you want to do like 2 poetry books and hashtag the Sealey Challenge, there's no rules. So you can do whatever feels right for you. And then other suggestions: use time wisely, read chapbooks. So chapbooks are a faster read. So if it's a really tiring day and you're really trying to stick to one per day, chapbooks are a great option. And libraries, of course. Audiobooks. I've never done an audiobook for the Sealey Challenge, but that's an interesting idea.
I did one last year that was an audiobook, and I was kind of like shocked that it was an audiobook, but it was more of like a visual poem that was like kind of longer, and then there was like the audiobook went with it really well as you're like flipping through the images. And the I think it's All the Light We Cannot See is called what it's called. Sorry to interject.
No, good.
Actually, Valerie, what you said before about like talk a time to talk about poetry with intensity, I was like, yes. It's so hard to like contain it all the time, and then it's like this month you're like, whoa, like
Yeah.
overdrive. Yeah.
Everyone's finally doing what I want and making poetry a big chunk of their life. It's just, it's not sustainable for most people, but they'll do it with us sometimes.
Yeah, that's great. And there's a lot of suggestions on the Sealey Challenge website too, if people are looking for book options. And just wanted to shout out that some of these people are members of our Poetry Slam community. Of course, we know George Abraham, who has an amazing book of poetry called Birthright. And there's many folks on here who are familiar. I know Suhair Ahmad has been like a poet who I really looked to, I think was on Def Poetry Jam a long time ago, but ever since then I've been following their work. Yeah, so if anybody has any additional suggestions, let us know, but it's really good to know there's so many different formats too. There's this quote that I wanted to read, if I remember where it is on here. Well, basically, I can't find the quote because I can't remember exactly where it is. But oh, you know what? It's in the Lit Hub article. That's where it is. So somebody wrote about the Sealey Challenge for Lit Hub. This is definitely getting a fair amount of press, right? It's spread on social media, but people are writing Lit Hub articles about the Sealey Challenge. And there's this particular quote from this article. In this way, the Sealey Challenge has become a new type of MFA program, required reading, group discussion, a sense of community, accountability, and a diversity of themes. So it just connects with what we're doing with DIY MFA with this group as creating like a grassroots, completely outside of any establishment, literary experience that is always free and as accessible as possible. And the Sealey Challenge kind of enhances that, and it's probably why I'm so into it, because it's like what I'm already choosing to do. Okay, and we're gonna read some poems by Nicole Sealey, but before we do that, is there anything else that people like to share about their experience with Sealey Challenge? Like, how did you first hear of it? When did you start? Because it started in 2017, but did people remember kind of how they first came to them?
I don't remember, but I try to follow a lot of poets. Yeah, I don't know, maybe just somebody was talking about it. Maybe it almost seemed like I didn't hear anything about it, and then I heard a few people were doing it the year I did it. So, I kind of wanted to talk about too that some people have like a completionist kind of attitude about it, and they feel bad if they don't like. I I don't know, maybe sometimes I make it all the way through, but like it's just about reading what you can and talking about it and having like try to have fun hopefully with it. I don't want anyone to be like, oh, I couldn't possibly do 30, so I'm not going to do it. Like you don't have to. You could do 1, you could do 0. Like you could talk about something you read not that month even. It's not as strict as some people think it is.
Yeah, I agree, Valerie. And I think also this year they were like pushing more for that on the website about like that it can be more relaxed, and it's more about like having poetry in your days and like making it a ritual and stuff. And I'm pretty sure March is the one that I heard about it from, but I was thinking about it before and I was like, did I know about it before? Like I was keyed up to it last year. I think it was like maybe June or July. And then I was like, oh, let me see if I can get enough books from the library to like actually make this happen. And then I could like shout out Baltimore County Public Libraries, but like it was so good. Like it was so great last year. I mean, it just it was hard. And I think that the hardest part is the post. But I don't really know where else to post. Like I just anyway. But
Well, you said the hardest part was what?
Like posting on social media,
yeah.
which is what I did but this year be like I have to post every day, but like started, I was like, oh geez, I'm really gonna have to keep going with this and I want to make it to 31, which I did because I kind of like that competitive thing. But this year I'm probably not gonna do like the whole, and I'm not just gonna be easy, but yeah.
Yeah, I do feel like a big part of the Sealey Challenge is, yes, the reading matters, but it's also about what you write about what you're interested in. Because for me, that's the most interesting part is when I follow people who are doing a Sealey Challenge, I read what they write about the books. Like I want to know, what is that person's experience with the book? That's what I'm looking for the most. So I think when people connect like that, that brings about the Sealey Challenge energy. It's not just about reading 31 books. Although I probably will try to share 31 books. I think that's, but I, if I have a headache one day, it might be 30 bucks, but nobody cares, right?
Yeah, no one's counting or anything. They're not gonna be like, you failed the challenge.
Yeah. Great. So, someone's just joined us, just so you know, we are recording. You are welcome to share or not share your video, change or not change your name. Just heads up about that. It's totally up to you, but we are recording, and we hope that this recording will be another way for people to find out about the Sealey Challenge and to learn how people are engaging with it. So we're gonna read some poems by poet Nicole Sealey, because I thought, well, this poet started the Sealey Challenge and clearly values that we read poetry, and also is an amazing poet themselves. Or I don't know what pronouns they use, actually, to be honest. So yeah, but did anybody have anything else they want to say before we do that? Okay, cool. The poem that I really liked of these three was Object Permanence, but we can read more than one if people have another favorite one. I just really want to start with Object Permanence. And this was published by the American Poetry Review. Nicole Sealey has books of poems out, and I've read one of them before for the Sealey Challenge. It's really meta if you read one of Nicole Sealey's books during the Sealey Challenge. Recommend doing it. But this is one that was available online. Object Permanence for John. We wake as if surprised, the other is still there, each petting the sheet to be sure. How have we managed our way to this bed, beholden to heat like dawn, indebted to light? Though we're not so self-important as to think everything has led to this, everything has led to this. There's a name for the animal love makes of us, named, I think, like rain for the sound it makes. You are the animal after whom other animals are named. Until there's none left to laugh, days will start with the same startle and end with caterpillars gorged on milkweed. Oh, how we entertain the angels with our brief animation. Oh, how I'll miss you when we're dead. Okay, a tradition in this group is to read it more than once. So I'm going to read it another time, and then we're going to talk about our impressions. Object Permanence by Nicole Sealey. We wake as if surprised, the other is still there, each petting the sheet to be sure. How have we managed our way to this bed, beholden to heat like dawn, indebted to light? Though we're not so self-important as to think everything has led to this, everything has led to this. There's a name for the animal love makes of us, named, I think, like rain, for the sound it makes. You are the animal after whom other animals are named, until there's none left to laugh. Days will start with the same startle and end with caterpillars gorged on milkweed. Oh, how we entertain the angels with our brief animation. Oh, how I'll miss you when we're dead. I picked this one to read first because for me, of the three poems, this was the most visceral. I feel like it's deeply intimate and deeply moody, but also like beautiful. There's so many beautiful moments in it. I think when the word animal is used, you are the animal after whom other animals are named. There is this movie called Call Me by Your Name. It's like a queer indie artsy movie. And it kind of reminded me of that. I think there's also a book of a similar title, but I just really like the way that saying animal calls attention to emotions, to visual imagery, and to physical presence. And I feel called to physical presence in this poem. But I'm curious what other people do. Other people have any impressions of this poem? What's the mood of it? I guess I feel uncertain of that.
I thought it was surprising because I was expecting like a very, like if this was a traditional kind of poem, it would not end with "I'm gonna miss you when we're dead." It will just be like a celebration of everything. So I was glad that this surprised me.
Great. Yeah, so we can move on. Maybe we'll read another poem or so. It's also okay if we wrap up early. We'll just see how we're feeling. Did anybody want to say anything else about this poem?
Yeah, I was hello, I just arrived late, sorry. I I'm kind of struck by hierarchies in this poem.
Mm,
I feel like by hierarchies I mean things opening out from things, and also kind of levels of being. Like you're the animal after whom other animals are named. So I'm wondering if that means generation. Like if the other animals are named or the progeny of the person who's addressed here. But also like derivation and so like caterpillars gorged on milkweed. That's interesting to me in the sense that milkweed is kind of a lower level of things. It's not like, you know, the eternal rose or like, you know, the a flower as an image of love or something like that. It's weed, but it's also milk. And we have caterpillars gorged, and caterpillars are also kind of lower level hierarchy, but then they become butterflies or whatever they do. So it's just interesting how sort of emotion is informed by that kind of, and that's not something we typically think of as object permanence. So it's like object would be more like a rock, not like a hierarchy. So it's interesting sort of playing things off against each other in that light.
yeah, that's a really good point because I don't think that this poem is straightforward. I mean, it ends with "How I'll miss you when we're dead." There's a cynicism, perhaps, and an intimacy I feel in that. And I think you're right that there is some kind of untangling of hierarchies happening.
I thought the part about I'll miss you when we're dead is kind of interesting because a lot of times, like, there's this idea that you get to reunite with your loved ones when you die. Like if the husband dies first and then later the wife dies and everybody's like, "Oh, well now they're together in heaven or whatever." And she isn't saying I'll miss you when you're dead. She's saying I'll miss you when we're dead. So it's like she's not buying into that, we're going to reunite in heaven and be together after we're dead. Just kind of interesting.
I think it speaks to like maybe my interpretation was it speaks to kind of like a formlessness, and like returning back to like a formlessness and like that we're just in this form now, and then like will just be kind of part of the ether afterwards. Like the poem to me is like that experience of like when you're having a really beautiful moment and you're like, all of this is going to crumble at some point, but then then you make the choice and you're just like, I'm just going to be grateful for it and like feel it totally, and like, but everything's going to turn to ash, and just like knowing that at the same I like, to me the whole poem was almost like this like that experience in like an unfolding. I did get a little like lost towards the middle from it, but it ended there for me at least, too. It was after the animal part, that the couple stanzas from below the bottom where I kind of got lost on it, which maybe has to do with the hierarchies, idea as far as like just not, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I do think Nicole Sealey is a poet who is very comfortable leaving some mystery and uncertainty in their work. This poem actually was the one that I felt more connected to in terms of content. So we can take kind of a leap in another direction now. Let's take a look at one that actually we have a recording of, and it's on the Poetry Foundation website. So I'm going to play the recording.
This is Nicole Sealey reading And. Withstand pandemonium and scandalous nightstands commanding candlelight, and quicksand, and Zinfandel, clandestine landmines, candy handfuls, and contraband, and handmade commandments and merchandise, secondhand husbands philandering, and landless, and vandal bandwagons slandered and branded, handwritten reprimands, and meander on an island landscaped with chandeliers, abandoned handcuffs, standstills, and backhands. Notwithstanding thousands of oleanders and dandelions handpicked, and sandalwood, and mandrake, and random demands, the bystander wanders in wonderland.
So this poem to me feels more experimental than the previous poem, at least in terms of language. And I was trying to figure out if it's experimental, if there's like a particular meaning that we should get out of it. I felt like there was something about the hand that kept repeating for me, where it was kind of coming in and out of feeling like physically real. But that's just scratching the surface. Let me know if anyone else has thoughts about it.
I think if I didn't hear it, I wouldn't have gotten half of what I should have from it. It just adds so much to hear it read.
Agreed. Yeah, it's performance too. The words are performing. They withstand the pandemonium. Yeah, it's a very puzzling poem, I think. I'm just gonna throw an interpretation out here, and I'm curious to know what other people think, but and like that repetition does remind me of an emphasis on kind of the abundance that exists in the world, and that the poet is kind of in a relationship with the infinite, at least in the sort of Emersonian tradition. And certainly Emerson uses so many freaking ands. This is not an unusual thing for people writing in kind of an American transcendentalist tradition or post-transcendentalist tradition to do something like this. And I think it's interesting because another part of the and is capitalist too. This sort of need to always produce, that we're under pressure as a poet. And I know that Nicole Sealey is a poet who's very aware of being a poet and aware of building poetry community because they came up with a Sealey challenge. So they have a self-awareness about being a poet and who they are in the world, and this sort of pressure that you have to produce, right? You have to like read another book of poetry, you have to write another poem. And I think that that sort of infinite side of us and that sort of like pressure to produce and to be sort of fit into a capitalist system is all kind of woven together, but I might be really imposing an interpretation there because this feels so conceptual. I don't know. Let me know if you have any thoughts about that.
I'm trying to figure out what the syllable "and" represents. And at least in this piece, the notion that it's a what's called a copula, a joining, a parallel connecting of things in a series, is not really fundamental for me. And I'm trying to see if I can kind of grasp the range of things that the syllable is derived from, and I'm not really doing very well with it. Like command is Latin from co and com and mandare, but other than that, I'm not getting very much, and I'm feeling like it's just, as a syllable, it's kind of looking at foundations, like if you had a temple, what founded the columns or something like that. I think the wordplay here is fascinating because it ought to be kind of trite and repetitive, but it's not by any means, and I find that interesting. And I'm wondering how "and" that as a syllable and as a sound is sort of supporting that.
I like that, getting at the fundamental. While you were talking, I realized these poems, I mean, to some extent I already knew this, but just the number of "ands" that you can find in Withstand, and Pandemonium has it. Even words where you're not actively saying "and," like Pandemonium doesn't seem like you're actively saying "and," but it's in it.
Like meander is a great example. It's very unobvious, but you look at it, oh yeah, "and" is in there, and what's it doing in there? I'm not
Yeah.
sure. I'd have to go to the etymology sources and figure that one out.
Well, I think every single word in the poem has "and" in it.
Well, not everyone, but a lot of them.
Wait,
think
which
of-
one doesn't?
Find one that doesn't.
I'm looking.
On.
One.
On. Okay, there you go.
No, you might be right, Sue.
You got me. And with.
Yep.
Oh yeah, on and it's not "and." But it's hard to. It's very hard to. There's only a few words that don't have "and." So yeah, I like that you said the word pillar. It's some sort of fundamental.
In.
Oh, also "in" is not an "and" word, but there's not many words that are not "and" words. So yeah, it does feel deeply experimental to me because I'm not necessarily left completely understanding, but it changes my relationship to language. All right, we have one more Nicole Sealey poem to read. This one's sort of in between, I think, because it does feel somewhat experimental, but it also feels like there's an immediate intimacy as well. So this kind of brings it full circle. It's called Even the Gods. Does anybody have a strong desire to read this? Okay.
You'll share it though?
Yes. Are you able to see it?
Uh-huh. Yep. Even the gods misuse the unfolding blue. Even the gods misread the wildflower's nod toward sunlight as consent to consume. Still, you envy the horse that draws their chariot, bone of their bone. The wilting mash of air alone keeps you from scaling Olympus with gifts of dead or dying things dangling from your mouth, your breath, like the sea inching away. It is rumored gods grow where the blood of a hanged man drips. You insist on being this man. The gods abuse your grace. Still, you'd rather live among the clear, cloudless white, enjoying what is left of their ambrosia. Who should be happy this time? Who brings cake to whom? Pray the gods do not misquote your covetous pulse for chaos, the black from which they were conceived. Even the eyes of gods must adjust to light. Even gods have gods.
Thanks for reading. We'll leave it up on the screen if people want to review it again. One thing that strikes me about this is I noticed that gods is plural. I also noticed some sort of Greek and Roman connection. Olympus is mentioned, ambrosia, which I think is that the food of the gods.
Yeah.
There's some Greek and Roman references here.
I think ambrosia would be the Latin for Greek nectar, which is, yes, the food of the gods. I'm not sure if it's Latin, but it's the Greek word would be nectar.
Yeah, I'm curious why the poet's making those connections, and I think my favorite part of this whole piece is even gods have gods. You know, is what better way to humanize a god than to say they also have a god? But it sort of changes. I mean, that would be in many religions and many world religions, that would not be appropriate to say if you literally meant it. Now, we don't know if this is literal, if this is metaphorical. It doesn't negate any religious practice necessarily, but you know, the idea that there's something beyond God, there's something beyond some original force. Like maybe there is no singularity, maybe there is no originality.
Well, I think it draws a line between poetry and liturgy, and I think that's an interesting line and an important one to think about. When you say it's not religion, well, that's because it's poetry. Like a psalm is poetry, but it's also liturgy.
And maybe the gods feel like a creative wellspring for poetry too. Maybe that's why it's being mentioned. Although it's rough, right? This line, it is rumored gods grow where the blood of a hangman drips. Like that's a really rough image.
That's like reminiscent of the poem of the song "Strange Fruit."
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so there's this you know, component of racism in America and struggles for social justice, and I could see that this ancient Greek reference is brought into our modern times in that way, now that you've pointed that out.
I think that there are two sort of like forces that are informing the poem.
What are they?
Charlie, we weren't able to hear you after you made one statement about two different forces.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you hearing me now?
Yes.
I was saying those are two different like sources that are informing the poem. Like you think about your covetous pulse for chaos, the block from which they were conceived, right? As color symbolism, that has to do with race, but also has to do with religion. I mean, the chaos is in the beginning of Hesiod, and it's also in the beginning of the Torah, and the color imagery also informs both of those sources the same way that it also informs sort of racial symbolism. So it's joined in that line.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sort of like a past, present. Yeah, there's different ways that we're pulled in this. Cool. Well, that's the third poem by Nicole Sealey. And I'm gonna stop my share. So, well, I wanted to thank you all for doing this Sealey Challenge meeting, and hopefully we got some ideas about the history of the Sealey Challenge and why we're reading a book every day in the month of August. Although I think one thing that we talked about that I finally feel much better about is that, again, it's not about perfection. You don't have to actually complete an entire book every day. It could be something you formally read that you just want to share. It could be something really short. It could be a single poem from a book that you just want to focus on and write your thoughts about. And you could skip some days. So I feel like a little bit better knowing that I don't have to kind of do it perfectly. And then remembering to share work by authors in your community alongside maybe other authors that many people have heard of, and not having so much hierarchy with that. And then read poet Nicole Sealey, who's so cool, who like started this challenge, who gave us so much community and support. Those are things that I just wanted to emphasize. Would anybody else like to share their thoughts about it?
Thanks for talking about it.
Yeah, great. So the recording will be up, and hopefully other people will be able to comment and share and give suggestions, and feel free to share any links, Valerie, to any of the things that you mentioned, and I'll share some Game Over Books links. I hope people order from there. And if you have a book that you want to shout out, we would love to encourage people to get it to read for the Sealey Challenge. So, all right, well, we'll call it a night. We're ending a little bit early, but it was kind of a small group tonight, but I really enjoyed talking with you all, and have a great night.
Yeah, thanks.